Thank you for joining our webinar, Automating Data Analysis for Process Qualifications. Our speaker is Jack Wieland, Project Manager at Lowell. Lowell is the premier partner for the development and production of technologically advanced implantable medical devices. The contract manufacturer captures design intent and converts it to manufacturability through communication, anticipation, and the drive to meet and exceed orthopedic device companies' requirements.
Thanks for joining today. Like mentioned, my name is Jack Wieland. I'm Project Manager at Lowell. We're a contract manufacturer for major medical device OEMs, and we're located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We have one facility that is over 50,000 square feet, and 40,000 square feet of that is production. It consists of lots of different types of CNC manufacturing equipment and high-end inspection equipment, and we service several major med device OEMs in the United States. So we're 100% medical device, meaning that we're registered with the FDA as such, and we're certified to ISO 13485 2016. So being in a regulated industry, the FDA has several regulatory requirements that we have to abide by. And beyond that, most of, if not all of our customers have requirements that go above and beyond regulatory requirements. And the regulatory and customer requirement that we're going to be focusing on today has to do with process validation. So the FDA states that for any process that can't be verified downstream, that a validation must be conducted. And that's really what we're going to focus about today. So my company, Lowell, has presented at OMTech previously, and last time we presented, we focused on three key aspects to executing successful process validations. And these three aspects starts with clearly defining success. So it's important for all parties involved on the customer side and on our side to really understand what success means for the process validation that we're conducting. And once we all understand what success means, it's important to create nice looking visual assessments and summaries that basically visually describe this success criteria. Putting these in a nice looking table helps all parties understand. And once we have our success criteria clearly defined and a nice visual summary of what that is, well, then it's time to actually execute and execute some data analysis. So collecting raw data on your manufacturing process and running some statistical data analysis and gathering results. And that's really where we're going to focus today. We're going to focus on executing detailed data analysis and summarizing those results. And what I'm hoping to show today is the time investment required to conduct these data analyses. And we're going to talk about afterwards some ways to speed that up and some ways to automate that data analysis. So we're going to run through a simple example, and we're going to physically conduct some data analysis, and then we're going to talk about ways to automate that data analysis. So let's think of just a simple part that one of Lowell's customers might ask us to make for them. This example is a simple washer that has a few features on it. It has an outer diameter and an inner diameter and a thickness and a couple of other dimensions. It makes 6 dimensions total, and the customer is requiring in this instance that Lowell validate the manufacturing process for making these parts. So the first step, what we talked about just briefly earlier, is creating a nice visual summary of what we're going to be doing. And so what I like to do, instead of looking at a ballooned drawing like this, which can get busy quickly, is to put these features just in a nice looking table, which looks like this. This describes the 6 features that we need to have validation criteria for, and has some basic information about each feature. And so in this example, our customer has given us what success looks like. Our customer has determined that we need to demonstrate 95% confidence and 90% coverage for each of these 6 features. Now, all that really means is that I need to collect raw data from my manufacturing process, and I need to run some statistical tests to provide that answer, to demonstrate 95% confidence and 90% coverage. I need to run a variety of statistical tests, including a tolerance interval analysis, to gain a tolerance interval limits and ensure that those tolerance limits are within my specification limits deemed on the drawing. So some things to note about this raw data. For starters, all 6 of these dimensions here have variable raw data. Now, we're not dealing with any yes or no or any pass-fail data here. We're collecting raw data on our inspection equipment, and we're getting variable data for that. And what that means is that we need to determine an appropriate sample size to demonstrate this 95-90 success criteria. And finally, what we need to understand is that in these statistical tests that we're going to run on our raw data assume that the data that we're collecting are normally distributed. So I need to verify that for all columns of raw data that I collect. So I have what success looks like here, and now we need to start to develop a plan for validating this process. So this is an example of a flow chart or a validation plan. We talked about this a couple of years ago when we presented at OMTech, and we're just going to kind of gloss over it this time. If we start at the top row here, we have a confidence level of 95% and a population coverage of 90%. So in this instance, that was determined by our customer. So this row A here, this was developed by our customer, and now we need to collect raw data. So we have variable raw data, and so what that means is we need to choose an appropriate sampling plan. We talked in detail last time about how to choose this sampling plan and how that can vary for each feature that you're measuring based on the spread of the raw data that you're dealing with. In this instance, I'm more focused today on actually running some statistical analysis and running the analysis on this raw data. So we're just going to kind of skip to the answer here. And for this example, we're going to manufacture 3 separate lots of 34 pieces apiece, totaling 102 raw data points for each of my 6 features. That's going to give me enough raw data to calculate all of the statistical analysis that I need to run, and it's going to demonstrate and give me enough data to demonstrate this 95% confidence and 90% coverage. So what I need to do is physically collect raw data and then run statistical analysis on it. So at Lowell, what we would do is we would have our inspection staff collect raw data, and that raw data might look something like this. I've got my 3 lots of raw data for the first dimension, my 3 lots of raw data for the second dimension, and so on. And you'll notice that I have 34 data points for each column of data. So now I have all my raw data, and now it's time to run some statistical analysis. The results of that statistical analysis are going to get put in this summary table. And let's go over the columns that we've got here. So I need to generate a box plot to fill out this column to understand the number of box plot outliers and the number of data points that are outside my spec limits, if I have any. This column is asking for a p-value from the Anderson-Darling normality test, so I need to run a normality test. And finally, I need to run a tolerance interval analysis to gain 95, 90 lower and upper tolerance interval limits to answer the question of, is my tolerance interval within my spec limits? And the last thing I'm going to run is a capability analysis to gain a PPK value to understand the performance of the process that I'm dealing with. So what this requires is running several different statistical tests and some sort of statistical software And there's lots of different statistical software on the market to choose from to running these tests. And really, the software that you use depends on the raw data or the data that you're looking to analyze. So there's lots of different questions that you can ask for which software should I choose. And to start with, you need to know what kind of data I'm analyzing. In this instance, we're dealing with columns of 34 raw data points. That's a relatively little amount of data. If I was trying to analyze columns that had 50,000 or 100,000 raw data points in it, it might lead me to a different statistical software over another. The second question that needs to be answered is, who in the organization is actually going to be running the statistical analysis? I mean, do we have access to expert data scientists that have programming language knowledge, or are we having non-statisticians and non-expert data science run my analysis for me? That might lead me to use one software over another. Third question that I believe personally is important to answer is how important to your customers or to your management team or whoever you're presenting these results to, how important is high quality, visually appealing graphics to them? Some of these statistical softwares focus more on making high quality graphics versus others, and if that's important to you, it might lead you to choose one. And if it's not, and you're really only focused on the numbers behind the scenes, that might lead you to another software. And finally, what is your organization willing to spend on a software to run these sort of analyses? Some of these softwares are free. R, for example, this one here, is a free open source software. Anyone in your organization can obtain a free license to this software, versus other softwares on this list here are thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars a year to maintain. So really, you need to understand your organization's budget. Now, that all being said, when I got to Lowell, we were using Minitab already. That was the statistical software that was on our computers, and that's what we had to work with. So that's where we're going to run statistical analysis, in this presentation and in this example, because that's what I have to use. Your organization might have another one of these softwares, and that's most likely what you'll be using. So let's hop out of the presentation here, and let's actually try to fill out this first row in Minitab. So we're going to hop into Minitab, we're going to bring some raw data into it, and we're going to run a variety of statistical tests to try to fill out this first row. So let's do that. We'll open up an instance of Minitab. I have all of my raw data for my process here, and we'll just try to fill out this first row for the first column of data. So we'll bring our raw data into Minitab, and those first columns on that summary table had to deal with the box plot and number of data points outside the spec limits. So I can answer those questions by running a simple box plot. So we'll go to the graphing option here and run down to a box plot. I need to do a simple box plot because I'm only dealing with one y value here. We'll pull our raw data in. Now personally, I like to turn on individual symbols here. That's just sort of my thing. And we'll run a box plot. So I have a box plot, but this isn't super valuable to me yet because I don't really know where my data are relative to my spec limits. I have to add my spec limits in before I really know what's going on here. So we'll have to edit the graph, and we'll have to add some reference lines at my spec limits. So I know my lower spec limit is 0.748, and I know my upper spec limit is 0.752. We'll add those to our chart, and now this graph is meaningful to me. It's clear to see now that I don't have any data points outside my spec limits. There's nothing showing up on here as an outlier in Minitab. If there's an outlier on a box plot, it'll show up with a little asterisk or a star on it. I'm not seeing that here. So I can answer those first couple of columns. Sort of as a final sanity check on the outlier front, this Minitab has a formal outlier test that I like to run. We'll run that. It's called the Grubbs test. And what this is going to give me is, just more verification that, okay, this column of raw data does not contain any outliers. So now we're ready to move on to the next column in that summary table. And that next column had to do with the p-value for the Anderson-Darling normality test. That's the assumption when I run these statistical tests, is that the data are normally distributed. So I need to verify that. That's another basic statistics test in Minitab called the normality test. We'll pull in our raw data here. We make sure that it says Anderson-Darling, because that's the value that we're looking for in the summary table, and we click OK. Now we gain our p-value for the Anderson-Darling test. Now what this tells me is that, yes, the data are normally distributed and we're ready to move on. I've basically satisfied all of the pre-tests that I need to do on this column of data. I'm ready to gather the answers. The first couple of columns to the right on this PowerPoint here are looking for the 95-90 tolerance, lower tolerance interval limit and the upper tolerance interval limit. So we need to run a tolerance interval plot. And that's another option in Minitab called the tolerance interval for normal distributions, like we just verified, and we need to run a tolerance interval plot. Now, the customer's validation requirements in this instance were 95% confidence and 90% coverage. So I need to make sure that on my confidence level it says 95, which it does here. We're good to go. And I need to change my population coverage from 95, which is the default, to 90. So now I have the tolerance interval plot set up for 95-90. We're ready to click OK, and we gain a tolerance interval plot. Now what this is going to give me is my lower tolerance limit, this 0.749 here, and my upper tolerance limit, which is 0.751. So I've gained those two values. And the last test I need to run, and the last statistical test I need to run on this column of data, is a capability analysis, because that last column is looking for a PPK value. So let's grab that. Now we go back to quality tools, but this time we go to capability analysis for normally distributed data, and we're going to run this capability analysis. I need to type in that my subgroup size is 1, and I need to manually put in my lower and my upper spec limit again. I need to put 0.748 for my lower spec limit and 0.752 for my upper spec limit. I'm ready to run this capability analysis. And okay, we're done. We've gained a process capability report that gives me my PPK value here of about 1.5. Okay, so I've gained my first row of data with all of those tests that I ran. I've got the number of box plot outliers as 0 and 0 for out of spec. I've gained my normality p-value, my tolerance interval limits, and my PPK value. So 1 down, 17 to go, it looks like. And you can understand. I think that took me. I was timing that. That took a little over 4 minutes to do. I think if I was very focused on it and not explaining it, I could probably do it in about 2 minutes. And so it would take me a little over a half an hour to fill this table out. Now, at Lowell, it's very uncommon for validation criteria to be only on 6 dimensions of a part. We deal mostly with complex titanium components and assemblies. It wouldn't be uncommon for us to have validation criteria for parts that have 50 features or 60 features on it. Sometimes we've even dealt with parts that have up to 150 features on it. And in that case, if I'm dealing with a part with 150 features and I need to manufacture 3 separate lots for these parts. Well, now I'm dealing with 450 columns of raw data, 450 rows here of data to fill out. And you can really see how that time starts to stack up. And so because of that fact, Lowell thought it was worth the time to invest in automating this analysis process. These are the tests, this is the analysis that we conduct regularly, almost weekly at Lowell. Because of that, we spent the time to develop an automation strategy for running these tests. So let's talk about that a little. So what's important to know is that the analysis steps that are conducted are the exact same for every column of data that I'm dealing with. For every column of data, I need to run that box plot, that outlier test, the normality test, a tolerance interval analysis, and a capability analysis. Because that's true, that lends itself well to automating that process. So I reached out to several of Lowell's customers, several major med device OEMs in the United States, and it seems like for the most part, most of these organizations are using one of three statistical programs. They're either using JMP, that's JMP, JMP, or Minitab, or R. There's pros and cons to each of these softwares. It seems like, based on the research that I've conducted, that R is the most powerful tool out of these three. It has the largest library of tests that can be run, most options, most customizability. However, it definitely has the largest learning curve to get up to speed on how to use it. It's very programming and coding based. It takes a larger amount of time to get up to speed on how to use it. And Minitab is really on the other side of that spectrum. Like we witnessed earlier, running tests in Minitab is very button clicky oriented, for lack of a better term. If I need to run a capability analysis in Minitab, I just click on the capability analysis button. So it has a less time investment up front to get up to speed on how to use it. And JMP is somewhere in between. It has several more options, a little more powerful with what it can do than Minitab, but has a little larger learning curve than Minitab to get up to speed. Regardless, all three of these software, and really most statistical software on the market today, has the ability to be automated. For example, in JMP, there's the ability to script JMP using JSL, which stands for JMP's scripting language. Has the ability to create scripts and then have JMP rerun analysis after analysis on column after column of data based on what you tell it to do. Likewise in R. R is very programming and coding based, lends itself well to scripting, to rerunning analysis on column after column of data. And the same is true with Minitab. Minitab can also be scripted using its command session line to call local macros and universal macros, and JMP, and Minitab commands, and we can automate Minitab that way. And that's where Lowell chose to spend its time. So we'll talk a little bit about, and I'll show you an example of what Lowell did to automate Minitab for this analysis, and we'll rerun the analysis in Minitab using the automated fashion, and we'll sort of sum up from there. So this is pQt. This is Lowell's macro that was designed for Minitab, and this is pQt's user interface. This was created in Visual Studio and allows the user to select from different options for calculating these sort of process qualification, process validations, analysis. And notice at the top here that we get different radio buttons for different tolerance interval coverages. For the example that we showed earlier, and that we'll show again here, we're using this 95% confidence, 90% coverage. We have the ability to create summary reports that just give us lots of different statistics values for several columns of data, as well as the ability to make some charts for those columns of data. So that being said, let's go back to Minitab, but this time let's run the analysis using Lowell's automated version instead of doing it manually. And we'll open up a new instance, and this time we'll run the analysis for all of these columns of raw data using Lowell's macro pqit instead of just one, instead of just column B here. So we have this new menu in Minitab called pqit, and we can open up pqit's user interface this way. So the first thing I have to do is tell pqit where all of my raw data are stored. So we'll tell it where that local Excel file is, and we'll bring our raw data into the Minitab. And what you'll notice here is that for every column of raw data, pqit has assigned it 2 columns in Minitab. The first column is the raw data, so this was what we did the manual analysis on before. The second column is the information about the column. So this is where I get my nominal value, my lower spec limit, and my upper spec limit for this column. This allows pqit to run all sorts of statistical analyses on these columns of data without us having to manually type in the lower and the upper spec limit every time. So we have our raw data in here. Now let's make some charts and let's make some summary tables using pqit. So we'll make the charts for all of our columns of raw data that we have, and we'll create some summary tables for all of our columns of data, and we'll run pqit. Now what this is doing is it's based on the selections that I gave it, it's created a large script, pasted that script into Minitab's command session line, and executed it. So now it executed all of these statistical tests for all of these columns of data at the same time. So you'll notice I get several different tabs of results here. We get normality charts for all of my columns of data. We get an Anderson-Darling normality test and a Ryan-Joyner normality test. I also get capability analysis plots for all of my columns of data. This goes all the way down to my final column. I also get what's called a quad plot. This was a custom designed chart that we made, which basically I'll try to zoom up here for you, which basically describes all of those pre-tests that we did up front in one graph. So we get our box plot with our individual data points on it that's zoomed out to the lower and the upper spec limit. I get my formal outlier test, and I get more normality tests all in one graph. And finally, it gives us the table of all sorts of different results for us. So I get 1 table, 2 table, and 3 tables of results. Alright, so back in our PowerPoint, we'll go over the results that these tables generated for us, starting with the first table. The first table really describes the results of those pre-tests that we did. We get our box plot number of outliers, our number of data points out of spec, and really all of the results of several different normality tests. Our second table gives us all sorts of descriptive statistics, gives us the number of data points that were used in each column of analysis, which is important from the sample size determination that we sort of glossed over earlier, and ensuring that we have 34 data points in each column, and then ends with a performance, a PPK value. And the third table really answers that final question that we're looking for of is my tolerance interval within my spec limits, and I get yes values for every column in this example. And so, just like that, just using pqit and copying, pasting from these summary tables, I'm able to fill this results summary table out rather quickly. And this is a great way to speed up that the first pass analysis that we do when we do process qualifications and process validations. So now instead of having our engineers and our statisticians spend time on filling each one of these cells out manually, now they basically get the table filled out automatically for them, and now they can look at what columns of data they need to go back and do some extra analysis on. So for example, this balloon 5 lot 3 row down here, fourth from the bottom, has an outlier in it and also failed its normality test. So that normality test failing is important for us to understand, because the tests over here, the values that were obtained in these other 4 columns, assume that this test passed. So since it didn't pass, we run the risk that the results in these columns are incorrect or erroneous. So now my statistician or my engineer knows very quickly that they need to go back and take a deeper look at this specific column of data, but they don't need to go back and look at many of the other columns that have green values throughout the entire row. So just like that, we've reduced the time of manually filling out every cell into focusing our time on the columns that need some extra help. So to sort of conclude, if your organization does data analysis frequently, and there's frequent analysis that is the same, if you're running the same tests every day or every week for different columns of data, my suggestion would be to invest the time up front to automate that process. By doing so, you're going to accomplish several things, including drastically shortening the analysis time. At Lowell, using PQIT, we've been able to save over 90% of the time it takes to analyze, just by running it in an automated fashion up front. This allows, like I said, our engineers to spend the time where it's needed, as opposed to trying to fill out and taking the time to fill out that summary table up front. What you're also going to get is an improved data integrity. We saw, when we're doing this analysis manually in Minitab, at least, the amount of times that I had to manually put in the lower spec limit and the upper spec limit, and manually put in information about these columns, and every time I have to manually put something in, I run the risk of incorrectly putting it in, providing some erroneous results. And so by reducing the amount of times I have to manually put things in, I'm going to improve my data integrity, which finally is going to increase the overall quality of my results. The data that I'm dealing with are going to be more reliable. I'm going to need to rerun less analysis, and really shorten the amount of time it takes, while increasing the quality of the results. So to close, if you have analysis that you conduct regularly, by applying automation to that analysis, you're going to shorten the analysis time, while at the same time improving the data integrity and increasing the overall quality of your results. And thank you.
Thank you to Jack, and thank you to those watching. To learn more about Lowell, you can visit them at lowelinc.com or contact them at the link on this webinar's detail page. Access more manufacturing insight from OMTech's virtual education series at omtechexpo.com.